Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us to today's webinar hosted by ECIS. ECIS is the Educational Collaborative of International Schools. Established for 55 years as a not-for-profit organisation, we have over 500 members in 78 countries. My name is Georgie McIntyre and I am the Chief Learning Officer at ECIS, and it is my pleasure to introduce today's webinar. Just some brief housekeeping. There will be an opportunity for questions using the chat area, which we will field at the end of the presentation. We anticipate the presentation will take about 45 minutes, but please feel free to submit your questions in the discussion boards. Other attendees are here on their own volition, and you will all be automatically admitted here. Thank you very much for your time. Much of the world's population is now under restrictions of varying degrees due to the coronavirus pandemic, and the vast majority of our schools have been, by necessity, moved to online learning. Some countries, including China and some in Europe, are beginning to ease restrictions, and one of those being Denmark. Copenhagen International School was one of the first to reopen and have volunteered to share its reopening story with those who are interested. As requested by the Danish government, the primary school campus was reopened on April the 15th, following the guidelines provided. The campus is now in, I think it's the 7th week, with increased cleaning, social distancing and smaller class sizes in place. All grades are now returned to some form of face-to-face education. Please do be aware that these are not definitive strategies for reopening, as every country and schools community will have their own specific challenges requiring advice and guidance. We do, however, hope that some of these strategies and ideas will be useful for you in your own personal context. Before we hand over to Sabrina, I would like to hand you over to Sandy Mackenzie, who is Director of Copenhagen International School. Sandy, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks very much, Georgie. Delighted to join you all today. Today is a public holiday in Denmark, so this is not how I normally dress when I go to school. But we're delighted that you're spending some time with us, learning about what we have done. As Georgie said, we know that our context is not necessarily your context, but we hope that some of the learnings from what we have done over the last few weeks can be useful for you where you are. I am Director of Copenhagen International School, extremely proud to be so. I've only been so since August. Prior to that, I worked in the United States, and prior to that in China and Scotland. So it's been an interesting first year to be a director, in Copenhagen, where, as Georgie was saying, we're one of the first countries in Europe to lock down very quickly, very luckily. The government made a decision to lock down before we had a single death in the country, and then we reopened pretty quickly. As Georgie said, on the 15th of April, our primary school reopened. And Sabrina is the primary school principal. With her team, the leadership of the school did a fantastic job in preparing for about 350 students to return to campus. And I'm very proud of the work that they have done. And I'm sure that what she's going to take you through will be insightful and hopefully helpful. So I'll hand back to Georgie and to Sabrina.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for those words. Please now join me in welcoming and handing over to Sabrina from Copenhagen International School. Thank you.
Hi, so welcome. I'm glad you could join us. As Sandy said, we put a lot of time and effort into this. I had several people call me up and say, Sabrina, can we talk? And I said, sure. And after the third one, I was like, let's just find an easy way to do this. And so that's where we connected with Georgie and ECIS to put together this webinar, just to share it with as many people that are interested. So please feel free. It's supposed to be recorded. You're welcome to share it. As Sandy said, You know, we're really lucky right now to be in Denmark for lots of reasons. I think my next slide talks about that a bit, but part of that was they were very clear on what we needed to do and when we needed to do it by. So that helped. Georgie had asked me to introduce myself a little bit. You can see here that I've been in education for almost 30 years. This is my 6th international school. I've also taught in the United States. This is my 7th year in Copenhagen. This is my first principal position, and I've been in this for 3 years. And I also threw on there, I'm also the mother of a grade 12 graduate. So we're dealing with COVID-19 in lots of different ways in our house, not just at school, but also with world and how do we move from where we are now. So as we're here to talk about the reopening of our particular primary school campus, you know, we're in Denmark. And the Prime Minister came out the week of our Easter break and said, we're ready to start reopening primary schools. And that includes not just primary schools, but any daycares that had children from the age of 0 through primary school. And they were very specific that this was called emergency learning. It wasn't regular school. It needed to look different. It needed to feel different. And so using those guidelines, and they were pretty clear about a lot of their guidelines as we went through, they've morphed. They're now on guideline 6.0, and it kind of changes regularly. But based on those beginning guidelines, we set up for how to open up school. As I said, we're lucky. Denmark has socialized medicine, so we don't have to worry about that. We also have a very large campus. That's our school building that you see there. There's a tower for each division of the school. And we also have a high student to teacher ratio, and we were able to use that to meet the guidelines set out by the government. To get started, we really sat down and thought about what needs to guide us. What do we need to constantly think about and come back to? And we created these 4 guiding principles. In the end, number 1 and 2 really tended to be the same, right? As long as we followed the Danish, the guidelines set out by the Danish government, we really were protecting the health and safety of our students and staff. We tended to ask ourselves more, how can we keep everybody safe? How can we keep everybody healthy? And then we would go to the guidelines set out by the ministry, and then between those 2 would often answer the questions that we had. We also wanted just to make sure that when children walked back into school, even though it would be different, it would feel different, there still felt like school to a certain extent. And then we just wanted to make sure that we had as much information and were as clear with our guidelines with teachers and with students and parents as well, just so that everybody knew what to expect and would know what the next steps would be. So with those guide principles in mind, we formed a core team. And in Denmark, the government actually stipulated that these 3 groups should come together. The administration from the school, and that included myself as principal, my deputy principal, and our director of student support services. Also our union representative. And then in Denmark, we have another group. It's called the Work Environment Group. And that is in every school, and I'm pretty sure every business. And their job is just to make sure that the facilities are safe for everybody. And so there's 2 of them in primary school. And so the 6 of us sat down and just started brainstorming. They were getting information from their agencies. We were getting information from the government. We were throwing that together and talking and thinking, what is it that we need to be thinking about? And so we would then go away, and each of us would do some work. We'd bring it back. We'd go through it. We'd moderate it. We'd say what works, what doesn't work. We asked a lot of questions. And that was the basic, the building, the structure for how to bring everybody back. And then we had to start filling into some of the details. And for that, we needed a lot more people. So Sandy, who you've met, was part of that. But the nurse and the facilities manager with his team were really key in this as well. Getting into and out of the building was a question. The whole cleaning of the facilities was a question. And the nurse and our facilities manager really were key in that. We also had to rely on the IT staff. There was lots of tech that needed to be moved back and forth. We needed things. How do we get them? Where do we get them? And they took care of a lot of those things. And the other person on the team that really made a major difference was my primary admin coordinator, or the secretary, if a lot of you would probably know that term. Once we were back on campus, she really was instrumental in keeping track of student numbers, who was where, why were they out, when were they coming back, and again, we couldn't have done it without her and everybody on that list. And then the other group that really needs to be part of this is the teachers. They were flexible, they were open. I had one teacher who went from doing remote drama lessons to teaching 4th grade to teaching kindergarten, and now she's back doing drama again. So, and that flexibility we've seen again and again and again from all of our teachers. And I think that attitude, along with the effort and the time they've put into things and everybody working together, is what's made our reopening as successful as it has been. So health and safety, as I said, was one of our guiding principles. Again, the Danish government was very clear. There were clear guidelines around social distancing, hand washing, and enhanced cleaning of the facilities. And so I'll kind of walk through some of our thinking behind each of those 3 areas. So the first thing was class sizes. Children had to be 2 meters apart. We chose the number 10. We could have put more than 10 children in a classroom and still kept to the 2-meter distance, but at the time in Denmark, groups of 10 were all that were allowed. They also talked in their guidelines about having 5 children in a play group outside, and so we just went ahead with 10 children in a class. Once we had that decision, we also put out a parent survey, and parents were asked to say, yes, my child is coming back, or no, my child is not coming back for a significant health reason. And the reason that we stated it that way is because, again, Denmark stated that all children in primary school should return to school unless there was a significant health concern of one sort or another. And so we insisted that parents say yes or no because of this. Once we knew how many children were going to be back on campus, then we started thinking about those groups of 10 and how to put them together. Again, health and safety, we really wanted to limit contact, and cross-pollination was kind of the word we were using at the time. So we didn't want to have a lot of kids back and forth in the different places in contact with lots of different teachers. And so we've got several groups of twins and triplets, and we, right from the start, decided they needed to go together in a class. I also had a mother who emailed me and said that her son and another girl would be carpooling every day. They're in the same grade, so we went ahead and put them in the same class. You know, we considered them a family group, and they even enter and exit the building as a family group. And then we started thinking of the class list as well. Just, there are certain kids that have definite, that their relationship is very important in how well they do at school. And so we did what we could to keep them either with a really good friend, if that was the relationship that was important to them, with a particular teacher, maybe the EAL teacher or the homeroom teacher. And so we tried to think about those children as well. Again, Denmark said particular children receiving support, that they needed to continue to receive that level of support for learning support. And so we had a few children that had to go with a learning support teacher as their homeroom teacher, so that we can guarantee that they would continue to get the level of support that was expected for them. We have some children who were mild learning support and even moderate, and we didn't insist that they go with a learning support teacher because we didn't want to have a learning support class. But any children that were receiving intensive type support, we made sure they were with the learning support teacher. And then, you know, we typically have 20 children in a class here, as do most international schools I've been at. And with homeroom teachers, that's not possible then to create groups of 10. So that's where our learning support teachers became homeroom teachers, as did our EAL teachers. And as you heard, we had some of our single subject teachers who we pulled into the classroom. And some have come in and come back out again. But by using all of them, we were able to have 10 children in a class and still be able to offer classes, remote classes, I'll talk about that in a bit, in Danish, drama, music, and visual arts. And then currently now, and at one point as well, we have PE on the playground. So our PE teachers are offering specific classes or activities on the playground while they're out there. So as I said, they had to be 2 meters apart. And so once we had our classes, then we had to figure out how that day would look and where these classes would be. We did not have enough room in the primary school, and since it was only primary school on campus, we expanded 5th grade into the middle school. And they were very excited because they're going to be in middle school next year, and they were over there feeling like middle schoolers already. And they were in the middle of their exhibition, so it actually worked really well. We also agreed pretty quickly that the students needed to stay in their classroom, that we didn't want teachers coming in and out. And so we built on our remote learning and had single subject teachers continue to do videos with the homeroom teacher, then delivering the video and helping the children with the activity. Again, limiting the number of contacts for each student and for each adult. Also, students at this point, you know, we used to use the cafeteria. We decided not to. Students are all eating lunch in their classrooms. The only time they leave their classroom is to go outside for recess. They have more recess now than they used to. They're out for an hour and a half a day. Our days shortened a little bit as well, and so they're not in school quite as long, and they're outside a lot more. The Danish government, again, suggested get your kids outside, do PE outside, do classes outside, read outside, go on field trips outside, spend out as much time outside as you can. And so the way we did that was just through the recess piece. And then I talked a bit about as well, the Danish government said when children are outside, they should be playing with small groups of 5 children. So each class of 10 was divided into 2 groups of 5 students each. And then those children, when they were outside, those were the ones they should play with. Now, Denmark, as I've said all along, and I will continue to say throughout the presentation, they were very clear in a lot of their guidelines, which was helpful for us, but they were also very realistic about it. They said, yes, these students should be in groups of 5 on the playground, but we know that children will be children. So we know that they should be keeping 2 meters distance, but chances are they won't. We know that if a child is hurt, they need to be cuddled, and it's okay to do that. You know, we have 3-year-olds on campus. You know, they can't get through their day without being on the lap of their teacher several times during the day. And Denmark was clear that we know children will be children. That's fine. Do what you can to keep them apart, and do what you can to keep them isolated within small groups. And so I think we felt like we did that fairly well. So one of the sticking points really for us was the entry and exit into the building, trying to move in 7 grades at the same time in one door, which is how we normally do it. It was just not going to work, trying to keep the 2-meter distance. And again, Denmark suggested staggered times was an option, and we chose to go with that. We also broke our students into 6 groups by grade levels, except for pre-K and kindergarten we put together. And so we found 3 doors that worked into 3 spaces in the building. So some of them entered in one door and went to one gym, through a different door into a different gym, and in the main door down to the cafeteria. And then that was the holding tank, holding place for the children. And so by using the different entrances and the different times, we were able to get children into the building. Right now, we're down to about 10 minutes for pre-kindergarten and kindergarten who come in, and they would be the slowest. You can see there that we have cones set out that maintenance sets out so the families know where to stand and where about 2 meters is. And we ask people only to come at their assigned time. In the beginning, we gave it a half an hour because we weren't sure we could do it in 15 minutes. Within 3 days, we realized 15 minutes was doable. And then when 6 to 10 came back onto campus, then we changed, and now we've got a 15-minute window that we use. I mean, it's working really well. Pickup was more complicated because we couldn't figure out how to get parents connected to children. And we're, again, very lucky with our building. On floor 0, we have windows more or less around 3 sides of it. And with the 2 gyms where kids are gathering in the cafeteria, each having windows where you could see. So we've got parents walking one way around the building, and they can stop and pick up one child at one door for 5th grade, let's say, and then go to the next door for 3rd grade and the next door for 1st grade. And then we do the same route 15 minutes later for 4th grade, 2nd grade, pre-K and K. So teachers, it's on here. Teachers then go to their assigned areas, whichever gym or cafeteria, to pick up their children, and they bring them back to that same spot. Children have assigned seats either at tables or with tape on the floor in the gyms, where they sit and wait until their parents come, and then their parents come around the building. They can see them because it's all glass. They get up and they come sanitize their hands, and then their parents pick them up. You can see there that we have children have to sanitize their hands when they come into the building. They also sanitize their hands when they leave. And then we close the door. I don't know when they do in the with 2 to 5, but in pre-K and 1, we close the door after about 5 minutes after pickup time or after drop-off time in the morning. And then anybody that's late has to come through the main door, and they go up to reception, and then they're logged in as being late. So that was one of the, I think, as we were thinking about and planning for it, one of the pieces we thought was going to be the trickiest. And at this point, it just runs so smoothly and it goes so quickly. Like I said, 10 minutes for pre-kindergarten and kindergarten to get through the door. They know to sanitize their hands. Most of the kindergarten kids know exactly when to enter. You know, as soon as the child passes through the door, they go in themselves. And I've even got pre-kindergarten children who can do that as well. So it really does go very smoothly. We were very pleasantly surprised about that. The other piece of social distancing is just moving within the building. Our work environment group was very big on this. They were getting lots of information about it. You can see there, this is a big area. Usually we have what we call pods out, where children put their backpacks and their coats and their shoes. We've cleared it all out, and you can see the marks, and that's where children line up coming in from the playground. And we've marked other places where they need to sit in a similar way. The gyms are marked this way. Outside on the front playground, we haven't marked it because we've got other ways of indicating the distance that's needed. And again, we tried to, the movement within the building gets more complicated, especially when we're bringing children in and taking children out. But for recess, we've tried to, again, create a circular movement. So they come down one set of stairs onto the playground, they come in the building in a different way, and up a different set of stairs. It seems to keep the movement flowing, because our recesses are back to back, 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12. And it seems to work well. We have less children on the playground than we tend to, and so that's part of it, and that helps as well. They've all got a place to go inside or a place outside for the front playground where they can line up and go into the building, and it seems to work really well. The other piece about being in the building was moving children. We have a lot of stairs in our building, and so you'll hear kids on the stairs now. There has to be 5 steps, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, go. They yell at the person behind them, and the next kid, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, go. And they are pretty good about using with that guideline and that tool. They're pretty good about keeping their distance on the stairs as well. One of our big discussion points was using the banister. Should we use the banister or not on the stairs? And thank goodness to our enhanced cleaning. Yes, they should continue to hold on to the banister, because that's the safe way to go up and down the stairs. The elevator was the other one we had some big conversation around, because everybody likes to use the elevator, especially teachers, because when you go from floor 0 to floor 5, that's a lot of stairs. So it was agreed that with the 2-meter rule, we could only put 1 person in at a time, and they needed to wash going in and out. And so you can see maintenance rigged up a great way to put the hand sanitizer in the elevator. That's one of our Copenhagen International School water bottles that he's used there, and it works really well. So that was the social distancing piece and all the thinking we did around that. And then hand washing is pretty basic and pretty simple. Again, Denmark was pretty clear. Kids need to be washing their hands regularly. They need to wash their hands before they eat. They need to wash their hands before they go outside. They need to wash their hands when they come in. So pretty much anytime children move around the building, they're washing their hands. Into the classroom, out of the classroom, to recess, back from recess. Eating time, they leave the classroom, go wash their hands, and they come back. So they've gotten really good at it. They know how to wash their hands, and they don't seem to complain. We've got some raw hands. Our nurse says it's because they're not drying their hands well enough, but kids have brought in lotion, and the hands are in better shape now, I think, than we first started. So that they've learned something along the way. So as I was talking about the enhanced cleaning, again, this was something that the Danish government insisted on and gave particular guidelines around. And the nurse really took most of this on and worked with the cleaning company Typically, we have one person who cleans the 2 towers in primary school. And right now we've got, during emergency learning, when we first started, we had 4 people that were doing all of the cleaning. And that was because we were cleaning the toilets and the sinks more often. As you can see, handrails, doorknobs, anything that gets touched regularly needs to be cleaned. And you can see our cleaners come up and down the stairs regularly as they do everything else. Something else that we had talked about and were able to do was to assign toilets and sinks to pretty much every single classroom. We have 4 classrooms on a grade level floor, and we have 4 toilets. So typically we had 4 classes, and that made it pretty easy for the toilets and the sinks. Sometimes we had 5 classes on a grade level floor. We were able to convert a single subject class perhaps. And in that case, then we might assign 3 classes to 2 toilets, and then we had enhanced cleaning for those toilets as well. Toys was another one that was mentioned. The Danish government was very clear, toys needed to be washed twice a day. So the pre-K team came up with the idea of having toys in the morning and toys in the afternoon, and you can see the buckets there. So they would get to play with one set of toys for pre-K, K, and 1. They got one set of toys in the morning that they could play with, and then those would go into the bucket. Maintenance would pick those up and take them away. Actually, the cleaners, they would clean them and return them in the afternoon. And so after lunch, a second bucket of toys would come out, and they would get played with again, and then they would be taken away at the end of the day and brought back cleaned in the morning. As you can see, like the blocks there wouldn't be cleaned, but if they were used and set aside and not touched again for 48 hours, then they could be brought out again. And so that's another way that teachers are using some of the toys. Again, Denmark was very clear. What's at home stays at home, and what's at school stays at school. We are sending whatever work and paperwork that the children are doing, we send that home, but again, then it stays at home. So teachers actually had to step up and do more cleaning, even though we had extra cleaners in, even though they were doing a lot of cleaning within the building. We still had tables and computers and laptops and iPads that needed to be cleaned. And so teachers are cleaning the classroom desks regularly. They've got the spray. There's a special rag that they get at lunch to make sure it gets even cleaner than just a regular paper towel, which is what we were using during the other times when we clean. And we do not have a one-to-one program. We've got a lot of Chromebooks. And so right now, grade 5 each have their own Chromebook, though they still need to be cleaning it as needed or regularly during the day. And then we have iPads in the classrooms also. And so teachers are responsible for those. And that's what we use the wipes for, or for the electronics. And then the desks and tables are sprayed with the spray bottle and wiped down. Lunch was another major conversation. Our catering companies, when they heard we were coming back on campus, they said, we are here, we are ready, we're going to do what needs to be done. But again, Denmark said no buffets. And as we know, cafeterias and schools are all about buffets. So we worked with them, talked with them, and ended up coming up with the packed lunch that you can see there. Everybody was able, we decided to go with an online pre-order. So teach staff and children were given the option for a certain amount of time to order lunch every day. So they could order 4 options. There was hot meal, veg or non-veg, and there was a sandwich, veg or non-veg. And then they picked one of those, and then they would get that delivered every day to their classroom. And that seems to have worked really well. The children liked the food, staff liked the food. For the hot food, there was a small salad that you can see that came with it as well. As you can see, we also had the plastic forks and knives in the container. We know that's not as sustainable as we would like it to be, but without being able to do the buffet, it became a lot more complicated. The cleaning staff actually bring the lunches up with a special rag that the tables get cleaned with, and they actually pick it all up and take it away. So hopefully, I'm not sure because this wasn't my area of expertise, but hopefully a lot of that then gets recycled. And so far it's working. 6 to 10 came on, and we're using the same system with them, and I think we're going to continue that system through the end of the school year. So those were the big points from the Danish government about being on campus with kids and doing what we could to keep them safe. Then the other piece they talked about, and again, this has gone through different stages, but was people being sick. And if you're sick, what does that look like, and what are the guidelines around that? So what you see here really comes from the Danish government. This isn't our decision as much as us following along with what they say we need to do. They're very clear that nobody can be on campus with any signs of illness. That's COVID possible signs of illness, along with things like diarrhea, vomiting, any of those kinds of things that aren't even COVID related are still children and or staff are not allowed on campus. Any sign of a temperature, the child or staff member is not allowed on campus. We do not take temperatures of anybody when they come into campus, but if we have a child or a teacher who is sick or does have a fever, we send them home. If a child is sick, we call right away and we ask the parents to come and pick them up immediately, and we haven't had any difficulties with this. A child can come back to school, a staff member as well, after they are symptom-free for 48 hours. We are really sticking to this, and it seems to be working fairly well. We have had numerous people tested, and since we've been on campus, none of our staff or students, knock on wood, have tested positive for COVID-19. We've had lots of symptoms of it that could have been, but so far it's been other things that they've had. If any member of the household does have symptoms of COVID-19, the children are not to attend school. And again, the authorities are the ones telling us that. In the beginning, when we first opened campus, Denmark wasn't doing much testing. And so if anybody had signs, it was assumed that they had COVID-19. And so then everybody had to stay home. They're doing a much better job of testing now. Pretty much anybody can get tested if they want. And like I said, we've had lots of people tested. And so with the testing happening, we're getting the negatives back, the negative for COVID back for a lot of people. And then if somebody's symptom-free, then they can come in, even if somebody in the household had signs, because now they're negative. So as I said, it's the same for staff. They can't be on campus with any signs of illness of any kind. I've sent teachers home, and they can't come back until they're 48 hours symptom-free, which is frustrating for a lot of them. They'd rather be on campus, I think, than at home when they feel well. The piece that can kind of get complex is when a staff member has a family member at home that's sick. If it's any type of sign that's connected to COVID-19, then the staff member has to be at home. I had to send a staff member and her child home because the youngest one was at home with COVID-like symptoms and had not been tested. And it was just, but I'm fine. Yes, I know you're fine, but according to the guidelines, you cannot be at work. You know, you're the mother, she's a little one, she's all over you, even if she is sick. And so she had to go home. The child was tested and came up negative. And so mom and the other child were able to return to school before she was completely well because they were symptom-free. We have been very good about asking, and teachers have been very good about contacting doctors. And again, doctors have been very good about asking for the test because currently educators in Denmark are considered key workers. And like I said, right now, Denmark is testing a lot. And so pretty much anybody can get tested if they want. So this is just a little bit more about if somebody in the family does have COVID-19 and they can be isolated, then staff members are welcome to come as long as they're symptom-free, and they just have to, again, pay attention to washing their hands. So one of the other things that Denmark told us is that for children who are at home because of significant health reasons, that home learning still needs to be provided for them, some sort of learning at home. And we were doing remote learning before we came back on campus, and we knew that the learning that was going to be taking place at home would need to look different. And so we gave it a different name. We called it home learning instead of remote learning, just to make a clear distinction that it wasn't the same. As I said, we have learning support and EAL teachers who have never been classroom teachers, are homeroom teachers right now, as are some of our single subject teachers. So we asked our core grade level teachers to do the basic planning. They're the ones that know the curriculum. They're the ones that know what to expect of the children. The other teachers are part of the planning typically, but the core teachers are the ones who are saying, okay, now we need to look at 2-digit addition, or now we're going to do some small moments writing, and then sharing that plan with the teachers on their team. That plan is also shared with our home learning team, and then they take that plan and make it user-friendly for parents and students, and then upload that onto Seesaw. Our home learning is one way. They goes out to families. There's no feedback that's being offered at this point. It's strictly, you can take the opportunity to take advantage of what's here if you're interested. The teachers that, you know, who do you decide, how do you decide who is in charge of home learning? For us, it actually worked out to be pretty easy. We have 2 teachers who had significant health concerns, who doctors signed them off and said they should not return to campus. And so they are the ones that are doing and leading our home learning. We also upload the single subject lessons that are done for the homeroom teachers. So that goes out for our home learning group as well. But for the most part, there were some, you know, some hiccups in the beginning where we used Seesaw for portfolio purposes and a bit of communication. When we went to remote learning, we had to learn how to use it in a different way for remote learning. And so we used it in a slightly different way for home learning as well, to make it easier for the home learning teachers. And so there was a bit of new learning there, but right now it's running smoothly and has been for quite a while now. So the other thing that we really, as the fourth guiding principle there, was making sure that everybody had the information they needed. And so communication was one of the things that we thought a lot about, and especially with teachers and parents. And so all the information and documents that we created in the very beginning with our work environment group and our union rep, that was all put into a document with lots of links to it so people could access it. And there was all that information that I've talked about: how to make class lists, how to move around in the building, how to get to recess, who's on recess at what time, all, you know, who's in what classroom. All of that information was shared in a packet before teachers returned to campus. I use a daily bulletin to communicate with my staff. And so the work environment group, they put together a blurb saying how all of us had worked on this together, that there was lots of information there. We were following all the correct guidelines by the Danish government. If anybody had any questions, they could contact any of them or any of us with the administration. And I think that went a long way for help the teachers feeling like, wow, there's a lot here. They've really been thinking about it. They're prepared and they're planned for this to happen. We had a work day for teachers the day before students returned. And so on that day, we had a virtual meeting, again, to review some of what was in that information packet, and then to answer any questions that teachers had. And then we also had a specific task list for them. And I think that was helpful for them as well, because they walked in that day knowing what they needed to do and what they needed to get done and could plan for it accordingly. And then we also had to communicate with parents. And this started before we even went on remote learning. Sandy was sending out daily communication with parents just to let them know where we were at and what was going on. As soon as we knew what was happening, there would be an email from him saying, okay, the Prime Minister spoke, we're going to be opening primary campus. We don't necessarily have all the details. We'll get back to you. You know, we've got new information from the government. You know, we're thinking about it, we'll get back to you. So there were, even if it was just that type of an email, that communication made the parents feel like we knew what was happening and we were planning for it. We sent them more or less the same packet of information that we sent to the teachers. We didn't have all of it in there, but we had a lot of it in there. And then after they got that packet, we had a virtual town hall meeting the day before the children came back. We were rather surprised. We used Zandy's Zoom account and expected no more than 100 people, and we had over 100 people show up. So we shared a little bit of information. They asked some questions, and then we got to do it again so that the people who had missed the first one could ask their questions as well. And so I think that was really helpful. And I think after that, the parents felt like there were things in place that would make it safe for their children to return. And then once we were on campus, we've moved now to where Sandy as a director sends an email once a week, and then the principals send an email once a week as well. So kind of on a Monday, Friday, parents are still getting communication about what's going on and what's happening. And I think again, parents have really appreciated that. They've commented on it. They've talked a lot about how well we've handled it. And I think a lot of that in their minds is because of the communication piece. So this week, grades 6 to 10 joined us on campus. Last Friday, we had another work day. Because 6 to 10 joined us and middle school needed their classes back, it meant that we needed to try and find a way to move everybody back into primary school. With classes of 10, that was near impossible. So we reorganized our classes into groups of about 11 to 15 right now. We were able to do this. We still, for the most part, keep our 2-meter distance, but Denmark has also decreased that distance to 1 meter now, and definitely we're within the 1 meter piece. And so Friday, the teachers reorganized their classes. They thought about, they looked at planning for the next few weeks. They kind of talked about, some of them ended up on new recess times and thinking about new places, new routes for them. Moving 5th grade over meant we had to really think about the drop-off, the pickup, drop-off in the mornings and how they would get up to their new classes. And so we did a lot of that work on the Friday. And then on Monday, everybody came back, including 6 to 10. And for primary school, that was pretty much just back to what we were doing. And then 6 to 10 are now working on all of their social distancing and hand washing as well, and their extra cleaning. So as I process this with my deputy principal, and we kind of, and I, Sandy's shared some information around and looking at some of the information he's shared as well. As I think about it, some of the things I think that really made it work for us, number one for us was to involve the key staff members. I think involving our union rep and our work environment group really was key for us getting our teachers on board with what was happening. Having those guidelines and those guiding principles meant that we always knew that helped us make decisions. As I said, again and again, we'd come back to, well, health and safety. If we think of this from health and safety, what would the answer be? And the answer more often than not was very clear when we came back to those guidelines. We did what we could to build on what we knew. As I said, with home learning, we kept with Seesaw. When we were talking about the single subject teachers and how do we work on that, we built on what we had been doing for the remote learning with the virtual piece. And so we just, where we could, we built on structures we already had in place for recess and going to the playground. Just taking what we knew and building on it worked for us in remote learning, and it also worked for us in emergency learning. And again, just keeping it as simple and using what we know was one of the ways to keep it simple. Having the planning day on campus for the staff, I think really made a big difference. I think that gave them the time they needed to get their heads around what it was going to look like and to plan for that. And parents were okay with having their children for that day while we organized ourselves. And then the communication, as I said, parents have said again and again and again through remote learning and emergency learning how well we're doing. But I think a lot of that is, yes, we had a lot of things in place, but also that we're communicating with them regularly. So I think all of those helped us be as successful as we have been. And then this is one that Sandy, our director, again, has been saying from the very beginning, do the best you can with what you have. And I used this phrase more than once during this whole process with teachers, who are just like, I just don't know that I'm doing what I should be doing as a classroom teacher. I've never done it before. You're doing the best you can with what you have. Things have changed. There used to be 2 of you doing this, and now there's 1 of you. Then we've got less to work with, but you're still going to do the best you can with what you have right now. And it'll look different, but it'll be okay because you're doing your best. So I think this mantra really has been helpful for the staff as well. They say it to each other also. And again, we've used this through remote learning and through emergency learning. So if you're interested, we took our original documents from primary school and we've put them onto our website. You need to use this link to access them. This link has already been shared around, so please feel free to share it. As I said, they're static documents, and that's because of the European Union data laws right now. We can't have live documents there to share. So you're welcome to take what's there, make copies of it, make it work for you if you'd like. And I think that just brings me to questions. So, Georgie.
Excellent. Sabrina, I will let you catch your breath, because I think there was a wealth of information that you just shared with us, and yeah, absolutely amazing how you've approached sort of the school and thought very carefully about each and every sort of aspect. Particularly, I think the reflections that you shared with us is about, well, and the mantra about doing the best that you can really, really resonates, I imagine, with a lot of people on the call today. Just to remind everybody, we are recording, so we will be able to email this out afterwards for anybody that hasn't been able to access today or wasn't able to attend. And also, Sandy, we've had lots and lots of questions, haven't we, on the chat box, and Sandy's actually been asking them. So I will share some of these out because others may be interested in the responses. So Nathan asked, did you write your guidelines before you received information from the Danish government, or did you wait until after you heard from them?
Yeah, we actually wrote them at the beginning. So it was all around the same time. The guidelines were coming out. We were starting our conversations, and we wrote them knowing that we would need to follow the guidelines, but not necessarily with those guidelines in mind.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing. Richard's asked, is anyone planning to require completion of a training questionnaire survey like the Chinese schools? He said, we could require this form for staff, but there are difficulties extending this to families.
Did you ask that again?
Yeah. Did you actually do surveys out to any of the schools? A lot of the Chinese schools actually issued out surveys to the parents and students. So they're actually asking staff, but they're having difficulties extending that to the families. Is that something that you approached at the moment?
We did the parent survey just to get children back on campus, who was coming back on campus. Middle school and high school have done some surveys about remote learning with families at home. We didn't do that because they did it about the time that we were headed back on campus. We have talked about maybe doing surveys of staff and parents, but we haven't followed through with that yet.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. CGB is asking whether, and this might be sort of a general question, so other people might want to respond to this on the chat box, but are children and staff's temperatures being taken by the school?
No.
Okay, and that wasn't a requirement from Denmark, I assume?
It was not.
Yeah, okay. Kathy, can you share the brand name of the sanitizing stations? So perhaps you can share that with me later, Sabrina, and I'll send that out.
Yes.
Yeah. Alka's asking, are the masks or face shields not compulsory?
They are not.
Okay.
And actually our nurse is very clear that they are not helpful unless you use them the right way. And as soon as you touch them, they need to be thrown away. Yep. We do have a couple of children who came in with masks in the very beginning, but they're no longer really using them.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. We have a question. During recess, do the playgrounds play more freestyle games? They're asking this because in Brazil, the children play a lot of soccer. And are team sports possible?
Yes, we agreed that there would be no football. Football is a big thing here as well. And so the teachers spent a lot of times with the children actually talking about and brainstorming games that they could play. And some kids, created, shadow tag or other types of ways that they could play where they wouldn't be so close together. And that's where we also used our PE teachers out on the playgrounds to do their dance, relays, the beep test. They didn't like the beep test so much apparently, but yeah,
any of us.
Yeah, exactly. They've become pretty creative with the games that they're playing right now.
That's a fabulous idea to sort of almost embed the PE teachers out in the playgrounds doing those interactions. I think that's wonderful. Martha has asked, how are the kids handling the emotional aspects of all these changes? A very, very strong question there, Martha. Thank you.
It's interesting. For the most part, they're doing okay. We do have 2 counselors in primary school, and they've been doing remote lessons as well. And a lot of their lessons have been around that idea of, you're on campus, you're with your friends, but you can't touch them necessarily. You're not with the friends you had before. You might be with a new teacher. So they're trying to deal with a lot of that. They're also still seeing some children. Some of them are children from before that they were seen for other reasons. And we've also had them see some of the children who are struggling more with the emotional piece. But it's really, for the most part, the children honestly have enjoyed emergency learning. We are really surprised by it. They're more focused than they have been before. Teachers comment on less bathroom breaks. We have less social issues on the playground, and we really think that's because they have 5 children that they have to play with, so they don't have to negotiate that. They've got their brainstorming games that they can play before they go out, so that helps with the playtime as well. So overall, most of our children are doing well. The ones that aren't are the ones who aren't with their friends. For one reason or another, they were separated.
Yeah.
And again, the counselors have been working with them.
Yeah, excellent. Sylvia, did you share these procedures with the parents? I think she's referencing back. I think you probably mentioned that you had some Zoom calls with them.
Right.
Yeah.
We shared an information packet with them that contained probably 75 to 80% of the information we shared with the teachers.
Excellent. Martha's asked, do you recommend using homemade disinfecting wipes?
I would say our nurse would probably say no. Our nurse would probably say buy, something that's, and actually in Denmark, I think like the hand sanitizer has to be 85% alcohol. So again, in Denmark, there's particular guidelines that they would have to meet with that.
Yeah, excellent. I think this is quite an interesting question. I'm not sure whether you're able to answer or not, but Marlene's asking, how do we know the parents are following the rules about keeping children home if they're sick or if someone has COVID symptoms?
We call. Yeah. We pick up the phone and we call, or we've also had phone calls about the quarantine, because in Denmark, you're still supposed to quarantine for 14 days if you leave the country. And we've had parents that we've called and said, we know that you weren't in the country. When did you get back? How many days has that been? Your child can't return until such and such a date. So yeah, that's my primary administrative coordinator does that.
Okay, I bet that's a full-time job as well. Are you requesting tests to accept the staff back to campus and also for students?
Again, in Denmark, if somebody has COVID-19 in a school, then we have the responsibility to inform everybody that's been in close contact with that person. So if somebody has COVID-19 symptoms, we really need them to be tested. And if they test positive and it was the teacher, we would have to tell the class. If it was a student in that class, we would have to tell the teacher and the students. So yes, that's again part of the guidelines from the Danish government.
Okay, lovely. Just going through, there's lots and lots of questions. Everybody's coming up with some really, clear thinking here. Are there any parts of the procedures that could be shared as an example? So I think you've given that anyway. There's a link there that you've got on your website.
Yes.
We will be emailing all registrants from the webinar anyway, so I'll make sure that that's included within the recording and also on the email. So yes, you will actually get a copy of those.
Great.
Can a staff member wear a mask even though it's not required?
Sure.
Yeah, there's no restrictions there. Okay, so I'm just whizzing through these questions here. So Roland said, how does recess work in practice? I think you've referenced some of this already around the PEs.
Okay. So we've got children from different grade levels on the playground at one time. So I might have grades 2, 3, 4, and 5 out on one playground at the same time. Again, with health and safety in mind, if they're with their friends, they're going to play with their friends, even if they're in a different section, different classroom. And so we did what we could to split them. Didn't work out beautifully. We've got a couple of 4th grade classes on at the same time. And that happens with most grade levels. But so they're out there, theoretically, they're playing with their group of 5. We've got 2 different playgrounds. So depending on what playground they're on, teachers are brainstorming ideas for games with them. They're coming up with their own. And when we've been lucky, we've had the PE team out there providing structured activities for them to engage in as well.
Lovely, thank you, Sabrina. Just to let you know, there's lots of people thanking you for taking the time to do this webinar. They're all saying it's been extremely useful. Another question here, do you have a school bus? If yes, how do you manage distance on the bus and at different entrance times?
We do have a school bus, and we chose not to use it during this time. We talked about it. We would have to have put children in certain seats far away, which meant we would have needed more buses, and it just became really complicated, and we've canceled it for the rest of the year.
Okay. So I'm just going through the questions again. Can students bring food for home, or did they need to eat the cafeteria food?
So they are allowed to bring food for lunch and for snack, and they do that. Again, Denmark said they could not bring in food to share. So birthday parties where you normally bring in cupcakes, not allowed. You can't even go to the store and buy pre-wrapped food. We're having to find other ways to celebrate birthdays.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. Definitely singing songs, etc., is always a helpful way.
Yeah,
Sue Wakefield, she said that this is an excellent presentation and you've absolutely done the best that you can with what you had. Well done to you and your team.
Thank you.
Richard said, I agree with Sue, fantastic and so informative. Really, really helpful. Thank you for sharing. Very useful information. Question here about what are the procedures in the playground equipment, slides and seating? Are they in use?
So we put away all the toys and the bikes and those kinds of things, but children still do climb on the equipment. And again, the guidelines are they have to wash their hands before they go out onto the playground, and then they have to wash their hands when they come back in. Denmark did not close down their parks, and so that's why we didn't close down our equipment. And again, the nurse was saying as long as they're washing their hands when they go out and washing them when they come in, we should be okay.
Great, okay. Will you be using the same restrictions of having 10 students per class for the next academic year?
I hope not.
We've no plans as yet.
Right. Denmark is down to a meter distance, and I think we can go back for the most part to full class sizes at a meter distance. So I think we'll be okay.
Have you actually had anybody test positive in the school?
Not since we have had community members test positive, but nobody that's tested positive since emergency learning has started, either students or staff.
Do you have your cleaning staff do the extra cleaning on the playgrounds?
We've actually, we have one cleaning staff, and then the crew that comes in and cleans the building in the evenings when everybody's gone. 3 of them are the other ones that are in the building cleaning. And I'm sure we've got even more in the building now with 6 to 10 on board, but they are not cleaning the playground. They're only cleaning inside the building.
Lovely. We've got a lovely message here from Malawi saying that they've learned a lot today and thank you so much for sharing your ideas and experiences. Do you have a quarantine area if someone gets sick at school?
We moved the nurse into a larger room, and we've got 2 beds that were in school that have been moved in there, and they have kind of been sectioned off with dividers. So the kids can wait there.
Wonderful, okay. You'll be pleased to know, in the nicest sense of the word, I think that's all the questions. Oh, hang on, we have one more. Could you describe the shifts that you made in your daily schedule?
Right. So, well, like most international schools, our children used to go out to different single subject classes. That's not happening any longer. And they used to go down to the cafeteria for the lunch. That's not happening any longer. They used to have 2 plays outside for about a half an hour each, and now they're outside for an hour for one play and a half an hour for the other play. So the big change is they're in their classrooms for all day except when they're out at recess. And the single subject classes are, they don't get as many lessons as they used to, and they're all delivered virtually. But like I said, our day is a little bit shorter. We've got more time outside, and we're spending a lot of time with our hand washing. So in reality, teachers have maybe 2 to 3 decent lessons during the day. And Denmark again said that emergency learning was all about literacy, numeracy, and for them English, because Danish is their literacy. And so we've really tried to focus in on numeracy and literacy as well, along with, we've got some single subject pieces, and as a PYP school, some of the grade levels are able to do a bit of their units of inquiry.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. We've got some lovely comments here from people thanking us for hosting, and that they're planning now to sort of re-enter back into the UK. Thank you, Tracy. Everyone's saying how helpful this has been. Sandy, before we close, would you like to actually say a few words whilst you're still with us?
I'd be delighted to. Yes, I just wrote in the chat there. Everyone can see why I'm so proud of the leadership of the school. Sabrina and her team have done a fantastic job, and she was telling you about that kind of mantra that we've had. We actually used an Arthur Ashe quote to start with, which was, start where you are and use what you have and do what you can, and that's exactly what we have done throughout this period. And one of the things that our teachers have shown us is that they are very versatile, they're very adaptable to shifting goalposts. We overnight went to remote learning, and virtually overnight came back to campus to a completely new situation, and actually it's changed again since grades 6 to 10 came back. One of the things that I think that we may have been surprised by was the confidence of our parents. We started back with 80% of the students. We anticipated, or I certainly anticipated, a lower percentage than that when we came back. And we're above 90% now with our primary students on campus. The adaptability of our students to be able to take on this new form of learning, and yet they follow all of our guidelines, and they do really well. So I think there have been some learning, and some really positive things have happened for us as a community through all of this experience, even though of course it has been hard, and as I'm sure you all know from schools around the world, it's really quite wearing, it's really quite tiring on teachers to have these different set of circumstances happening to them. But what I would say is that we were nervous when we went back, but it has gone even better than we could have hoped for.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much both for your time. It's been extremely powerful, and not only the people that have attended today, I know this is actually going to reach a number of schools and actually really make a difference when they're managing these situations. So we're hugely grateful here at ECIS for you being able to share this, Sabrina and Sandy. We do actually offer a number of other free webinars. We're going to be offering these throughout the summer on various topics around re-entry, reintroductions. We're looking at campus access and buses and aspects around that. So if any of you are interested in attending any of the free ECIS webinars, then please visit the website. Again, I'll share the details of that at the end when we respond to you all. We're wrapping up now because we've gone over time, but really thank you hugely for your time, and congratulations. A huge well done.